Hi everyone, it's Emma here from the Verbal Abuse in Relationships blog for healthyplace.com. I've been wondering recently why it is that so few people know what to say to survivors of verbal abuse. Could it be that, as we know, verbal abuse is one of those topics that isn't really talked about in mainstream media, and therefore there is no real direction for friends and loved ones of people who've been verbally or emotionally abused to know what to say? Or is it just a lack of understanding? Is it one of those situations where you need to have been through it yourself to really understand how these kind of relationships come about and why people stay in them? Nevertheless, I found that when thinking about what to say to somebody who has been verbally or emotionally abused, it's often better to start with what not to say. There are plenty of terrible things you can say to somebody who's been in an abusive relationship, but I believe the worst thing that you can say is, "Are you sure?" I get where this comes from. I think that accusing somebody of relationship abuse is a big deal, but I don't think it's something that anybody who's survived emotional or verbal abuse enters into lightly. Normally it takes months or even years for the victim to come to the realisation that they've been abused, let alone discuss or talk about it. So the first thing you need to understand is that for that person to admit to you that they've been in a psychologically abusive situation and that it was something they didn't feel able to walk away from is a big deal. Secondly, bear in mind that asking somebody if they're sure they've been abused kind of feeds into the very foundations of what verbal abuse thrives upon, which is self-doubt. Something I found really difficult to overcome when I was recovering from an abusive relationship was that feeling of always doubting myself and always doubting my instincts, my perceptions. And let me tell you, it's a really hard journey to go through, and it's difficult to ever kind of totally trust your instincts again and not doubt your perception of events. What you're doing in undermining that person and questioning their experience, or at least their kind of perception of that experience, is you're kind of taking away their voice. And if you've been in an abusive relationship, you'll know that not having your own voice and feeling like you're not allowed your own thoughts and feelings without them being policed and monitored 24/7 is kind of like being in a prison cell. So this is something you really want to try and avoid. You don't want to question somebody who's been verbally abused about their experience, and you don't want to undermine them. It's far better to accept what they're telling you. Of course, you can ask questions, but it's better to trust in what that person has chosen to tell you. Doesn't mean you always have to believe their version of reality, but if you do have doubts about what they're saying, just remember that you are not the one who was in the relationship, and abusers by their very nature are masters of deception. This is how they get people into abusive situations to trust them. This is how they undermine somebody's thoughts and feelings and reality by using techniques like gaslighting and manipulation. So remember that when you're dealing with somebody who's been through an abusive relationship, and always try to speak with compassion and kindness, even if you don't know exactly what to say all of the time. Okay, for more information on verbal abuse in relationships, please go to the Healthy Place blog, which I'll link below. There's also an article that I'm publishing this week, which draws on what not to say to people who've been in verbally abusive relationships in a little more detail. Thanks very much. See you next time. Bye.